Good afternoon, and welcome to the Global State of Information Security 2013. I am Mark Lobel. I'm a partner with PriceWaterhouseCoopers, based here in New York, and proud to have shepherded our effort here for the last 15 years, which, shockingly, since I'm not that old, I know that's amazing to everybody. But we've got a wonderful afternoon for you. For the first few minutes here, I'll be taking you through the results of the research that we've done proudly for the last 10 years with an absolute visionary in the field, Bob Bragdon, and the folks at CSO and CXO Media, who we thank so much for the partnership that we've had and the teamwork in pulling these materials together every year. It is a very heavy lift to get through the mounds of data and identify the nuggets that we'll be sharing. We have a wonderful keynote for you. Judith Germano, the Chief of the Economic Crimes Unit for the Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney's Office, District of New Jersey is here. We'll do our keynote, as well as we have a set of notable luminaries joining us on a panel this afternoon. Dennis Briggs is from McGraw-Hill, Frank Price from Alcatel-Lucent, my apologies, and Nashira, and I'm going to make sure I get this correct, Nashira Layad from Time Warner. So welcome all of you today to the Global State of Information Security. We also are going to have an event and reception, and everybody's welcome to stay and join us afterwards for that as well. So, little background, as I said, a partner with PriceWaterhouseCoopers. It's been 18 years I've been with the firm in our information security consulting practice, helping bring solutions to our clients, and been on the international boards for ISACA, proud to be the agent of the Information Security Forum's USA chapter, as well as spoken at a number of their events as well. And proud to have this material picked up. So I think it was in the Wall Street Journal blogs this morning. It'll be in the Wall Street Journal tomorrow. So we're getting immediate press as well as cover story for CSO and CIO coming up in this month's issue. I highly recommend, if you haven't subscribed, you absolutely should do that and get all the quality content that's there. So what did we find? We found that the game has changed, which is why our theme this year was changing the game. And yes, no political overtones. That's why it's not game change. It is changing the game. A month out from an election, we're not going down the politics path. Information security, frankly, is way too important for that. And we couldn't have chosen a better day. The events of the last 48 hours alone, denial of service attacks on the websites of major financial services institutions. And I don't know if folks saw, but Senator Rockefeller, who was one of the sponsors of the Rockefeller-Snow Cybersecurity Act, which has been in Congress for years at this point, announced on Tuesday that he's writing letters to the CEOs of every Fortune 500 company, asking them to reply to what they're doing about cybersecurity. Now, I don't know about you, but when I get a letter from a U.S. Senator, you probably want to respond to it, as I expect many will. So I know some of the people in this room are going to be busy in the next couple of weeks figuring out how their CEOs should answer those particular letters. But there's a lot been happening in the security space. We're 1 year out after the Occupy Wall Street and the hacktivists. A lot of events going on, so it's very timely that we're bringing this information out. And just to give kind of a context, we spoke about this a little bit last year, and in the road shows and the talks we've been having on the topic for the last year, it's really proven to lock in a model of 4 waves of cybersecurity events happening. Wave 1, defined for you as cyber nuisance. Go back to the late 90s, website defacements were a significant issue. A little later, early 2000, cyber crime, identity theft, credit card theft became big business, and you could argue at about the same time, cyber espionage, so nation state, advanced persistent threat, whichever phrase you want to learn, that third wave of cybersecurity, cyber espionage occurred. And then more recently, we've seen hacktivism, that fourth wave. of cybercrime becoming a very significant issue. Why are those waves a challenge for our organizations? Because each one requires and demands a very different response. If you're playing the cyber nuisance game from the early 90s, well, the game changed on you. If you're playing the cybercrime game and you're ready to respond, if you're hit with cyber espionage, the game has definitely changed. And you're responding completely incorrectly. You've put your team on the field the wrong way. You're not ready for what's happening. And if you're prepared for cyber espionage and cybercrime, but your company's making statements that are inciting people to attack your website, the game has changed on you again, and you're not ready for the fourth wave. And will there be a fifth? Will there be a sixth? I think those are great questions to ask our panelists. I'll throw it to them to answer those. But have you set your organization, your employees, your senior executives to understand what the game is and how you need to play it, how you need to put your players on the field, how you need to have your offense and your defense to play the game? So with that, we'll take you through the Global State of Information Security 2013. Gary Loveland is the U.S. leader and global leader for our security practice, and this game-changing theme of changing the game, came from a conversation we had, and I thought it was appropriate to quote, "You can't succeed in the environment if you don't know the players and you don't know the rules." I'll just give you one quick example of that. If you had a cybercrime, somebody broke in, got credit card numbers, the standard response, it would be you ring fence it, you identify which system had the breach, you lock down the access, maybe do forensics on it, try to investigate, do credit monitoring for the employees or for your customers who were impacted, and you get back to business as usual as quickly as possible. Depending on the depth of the breach, you may need a little bit more. If it's cyber espionage, if there's a nation-state or nation-state sponsored attack, the last thing you want to do is put a ring fence around it and start cleaning it up. You want to wait. You want to identify all the points where malware has been installed in your environment. You then want to have a plan to remove that malware in one fell swoop. Because if you don't, you only get part of it. The parts you didn't get will be used to further infest your environment. It is a very different game you have to play. And are your organizations set to play all the different games that are out there? So we've talked about that the game has changed, and it will continue to change, with Senator Rockefeller sending these notes to the CEOs, with the SEC disclosure requirements that came out last year. We could talk a little bit more about this on the panel as well, that they're asking you, or currently suggesting, as the SEC does, that you disclose those risks. But do note that if not disclosing a risk might mean that one of your statements, one of your financial disclosures might be materially incorrect, you're setting yourself up for trouble if you're not making those disclosures. So we were looking back, actually, as we were preparing for the session, we were talking about the first year we did this survey. And we looked back, and the headline was virus attacks. And I think I'm getting a lot of head nodding. Don't you wish that a virus in your environment was the worst possible thing that could be happening right now? If that was the only thing you had to worry about, and back then, yeah, it was a big deal. We didn't have the tools, we didn't have the processes. But today, the game has changed, and we need to be ready to play that new game. So, take you through our methodology, some of the good news, some of the things we saw, that game of confidence. what we saw leaders doing and how we're defining leaders this year, some of the risks and some of the challenges. And we saw some trends we thought were hopeful last year, but when we put them in a 4 or 5 year context, they were not what we're hoping for. We slid backwards in a couple of areas. We'll talk about that. How you play the game, what things and pieces you should be considering, and what this means. What are the 4 areas you should be taking back from the session? Maybe not after the session, we'll do drinks, but after the drinks. You got to have your priorities. What you should be taking back to your companies tomorrow and looking at how they're playing the game. What pieces, processes, licenses, support, maintenance, people, training you have in place. So the Global State of Information Security Survey, it's a worldwide survey we executed, done online from February 1st through April 15th, 2012. 15th year, as I said, 10th year very proudly with CIO and CSO magazine. It's the respondents to the survey are readers of the CXO media publications and their sister publications globally, as well as PriceWaterhouseCoopers clients from 128 countries. This year we had 9,329 total responses from CEOs, CFOs, CIOs. It's 40 questions, and most importantly, the margin of error continues to be, because of the size of our response base, plus or minus 1%. So if something moves up 1 point or down 1 point as you look at the data, we're pretty much saying it's flat year on year. If it moves more than a point, we feel it has statistical significance and we start looking at it for a trend. If it moves 40 points, something's really going on and we've got to pay attention to it. By breakout, good set of respondents by title, a little heavier on the chief executives, which one thing, without even getting into the questions, we're starting to get more of that senior executive buy-in and interest in this topic. Good breakout by company revenue size, pretty consistent year on year. Little heavier, in North America, but we did look at the data and we didn't see, because we were slightly heavier versus our 35% prior years, 40% this year, we didn't see that skew the data in any way. Also very good breakout by industry. So good breakouts, technology, financial services, and so on. And even if we get down lower, automotive, power, and utilities, still very good breakouts, which is important for us, because as we leverage this for the strategy work we do and the benchmarking we do, you need to have that depth. You need to have at least 30 responses to get a statistically significant sample, and hopefully a lot more than that. And the research and data that we've been able to cull give us that and a lot more. So we're able to look at it and say, yes, for your industry, here's the trends we're seeing globally, and depending on how deep it goes, here's the trends you're seeing in your geography, in your industry as well. Which always, I look at that and I say, if somebody's got a survey with 10 or 15 or 20 responses, it's interesting, but I've got to look at the statistical validity of it. You've got to make sure of what you're getting and what you're looking at it. And how you're looking at it. So let's start with how people think about security. This first group of questions, we wanted to understand how people perceive themselves. How senior executives, security executives perceive how their organization is doing in information security. So we asked the question and asked our respondents to tell us, do you have an effective strategy and are you proactive in executing that plan? Are you better at the strategy than the execution? Or, conversely, are you better at the execution than the strategy? Or, if there's no strategy, there's no execution, there's just something happens and, oh my God, it's another one of these. Let's figure out how to respond to it. These are our labels, not the people who responded. So we've got front runners, strategists, tacticians, and what we call firefighters. And interesting, we're seeing pretty consistent year on year. Front runners within the margin of error very clearly. Strategists pretty close. Tacticians right there within the margin of error. And firefighters, a very slight bump up, but nothing material, nothing significant. So, first of all, those who know their statistics and love them will know this is not a bell curve. Normally you would expect a little number of quote-unquote leaders, which is also why we call them front runners instead of leaders. Not sure that 43% of the respondents are doing everything we would expect a true leader in information security to be doing. 27% strategists, 15 and 14 respectively. This is what statisticians call a ski slope, not a bell curve. The bell curve, small group at the bottom, small group at the top, a lot of folks falling in the middle. So with this ski slope, we started to peel back and see what else we found as we looked at the data. We said, okay, 43% said they have a strategy and they think it's effective, or they're implementing it effectively. But let's see if people are generally confident. So let's look at their organizational culture. How effective are you at putting security behaviors into your organizational culture? And from that, when we add up very confident and somewhat confident, not just the whole program, but just the culture, we've got 68% of our respondents say they are somewhat or very confident in their security controls, in how they've implemented it, and how they're pushing it through the culture. Now I'm going to call some of these numbers into question. I believe the people responded. I know these are the numbers we got. But as we look at how many companies are doing training, whether training or awareness increased or decreased, should it really be 68% of the respondents are that sure that they've effectively put security into their culture? We started this theme years ago, really highlighted it last year, and we'll touch on it again this year. There's a bit of overconfidence. There's a false sense of security out there. Is that true of every organization? No. There are organizations that are true leaders in security. Does every company need to be a leader in security? No. You just need to align it with the risks to your business. But are there companies who should be doing better than they are? Well, I can tell you, and my partners can tell you based on the amount of business coming in the door these days, oh yes, there is absolutely organizations that can be taking it to the next level. What is interesting as we look at the prior 5 years, so in the prior slide we said 68% said they were somewhat or very confident, but that's a downward trend, which we thought was really, really interesting. So we asked this question, how confident are you the security activities are effective? And in 2000, I'm dating myself now. In 2008, 83%, and this year we're down to 68%. So we are seeing a very clear, undeniable trend that confidence is slowly eroding. Now, is that a bad thing or a good thing? From my perspective, I actually think it's a good thing. I forgot the group, but you can't solve a problem unless, first of all, you admit there was a problem in the first place, and you agree on what the problem actually is. And with this erosion of confidence, I think we're just getting more realistic about the challenges we're faced, the challenges that are facing us, and the task we have ahead of us to truly lock in and protect our customer information, our employee information, and more importantly, our intellectual property, which is streaming out of companies, based on my experience, at a tremendous rate. Intellectual property for me is the iceberg these days of information security. A little bit of what's happening actually becomes public. A lot of it beneath the surface is identified but not public. And then there's a lot more that is not identified. And global warming is not going to help. So who are leaders? We set out 4 criteria. So to twist it a little bit, the first one we were asking, how do you perceive you're doing? We then flipped the question and we said, we're not going to ask you how you're doing. We're going to see what you're doing and then we'll make a judgment based on that. So we put 4 criteria up there. We took 4 of the questions out of the survey, and we said, do you have an overall information security strategy? Great. Do you employ a chief information security officer or equivalent? You know, we're not hung up on the title. It can be a senior VP of security. It can be the CSO who's a CISO, executive director of security, whatever the title is. But it's got to be senior. And more importantly, they have to report to the top of the house, to the CEO, CFO, COO, legal counsel, or CIO. But if that manager of security is 4 levels below the CIO, you probably haven't escalated the importance of security of the organization to what it potentially could be based on your risk. And we've seen it time and time again. We're working on a project right now, and you know, there was 1 security person in the organization. It's a small to mid-sized business, and our project started the same day as the new security manager. So we kind of said, okay, we may not, we might find a few things here that might be missing from your framework, and there may be some opportunities to improve your strategy here. Having a security person here for more than 24 hours is probably the first one, but there's going to be more than that. So what do you think? When we slice the data by the companies that said they were consistently doing these 4 activities, so strategy, CISO, so senior security executive, measuring, and monitoring. What do you think? 48%? 30%? Do we jump up to 50? Whatever number you have in your head, 8% is the one that you probably should have. So we compare to 42% of the front runners. 8% of our respondents globally were doing those 4 things consistently. Now, does that mean the 42% are wrong? Well, not all of them. Some of them are probably off base, but some of them may have aligned their security activities with the business risk. They don't need to be leaders. They don't need to have everything covered. And that's fine. But A, if we're going to have an interconnected world and an interconnected society, are we going to have to protect that infrastructure consistently? Yes, and everybody's going to have to step up to a certain degree. And B, are there companies that do not align their security with the risk that the company has? Yes. Absolutely, I can tell you from experience that there are definitely opportunities for improvement. So 8% of the respondents are leaders. So take this back and stop for a moment and say, as you're playing the game right now, do you need to be playing a game as a leader? Do you need to be somewhere in the middle? Can you be a follower based on your business and based on the risks? Which is fine. Not everybody needs to be out front on that bleeding edge. But are you doing what you should be doing to protect your clients, your employees, your intellectual property, and frankly, your senior executives, and frankly, your job? Are you doing what you should be doing? Should you be closer to a leader than you are today? Well, I'm sure some questions are going to come up. We're going to have the panel, and we'll take all the questions, and I'll throw them to a group of very smart people to answer them as well. Are leaders doing better? Yes. Measurably better? Yes. We pulled a couple of measures. Leaders expect security spending to increase over the next year, 74% versus 45% for the entire survey. Information security is involved in major initiatives at project inception. Doesn't cost you really much to get involved earlier rather than later. 45% of the leaders are doing that, only 25% of the entire survey. And security spending completely aligned with the business goals. 50% of the respondents who we defined as leaders, not them, but us, versus 30% for the entire survey. So what things can we learn from the leaders? And what things should we consider and do more effectively? So we've taken a look at some of the good news. Now some good news and bad news kind of mixed in together. What's really interesting in this one, we were pleased to see, but it led us to a conclusion this year that we hadn't made in prior years. The first piece that led us to the conclusion, which I'll get to in a minute, is that confidence in security spending is lowering down to the levels we've seen historically. So we covered the 2007 to 2012 years. It has been averaging around 44–45%. We could all see the impact of the recession, Great Recession, what do we call that? There's got to be some name for what happened to us in 2008. We saw the impact of that in confidence in security spending, and then we saw the opposite the year after. Bad things happened, and we got the numbers that proved it, and we saw the confidence jump to 52%, which was not only the highest in this range of years, but that's the highest level of confidence that security spending would increase in all the years that we've done the survey. So we said this is going to be an exciting year. And then the last 2 years, we've seen it moderate. So confidence last year, and then this year coming back down to the historical average of 45% think they're going to get budget increases, or security spending will increase over the next 12 months. Now, does that mean that security spending increased? Not necessarily. We'd hope it would, but we did not see that consistently when we look at what people are doing. One thing that shows that the economy is stabilized, and you know, I've been doing this long enough, we like to look at the security trends as a proxy for what's happening in the economy. And that's the point I was getting to, is the economy is driving security spending as much, if not more, than business risk. Is that right? Should it be a risk-based approach, not an economy-based approach? Yes. Our point of view is you should be taking a risk-based approach to security. But what we're seeing consistently is it's an economy-based approach to funding. If the company's doing well, security will we'll give you some money over here. But if not, it gets cut back. Now, the one piece that shows us that the economy's been stabilizing and that security funding has been stabilizing, through 2007, 2008, 2009, we saw many projects being delayed or deferred from a CapEx as well as an OpEx perspective. And what we're showing here is much less. So people are saying, this year we did not defer security-related initiatives related to CapEx and not reduced OpEx related to security. So it's a little, you know, we're kind of doing a little counterintuitive, but the bars are going up. The trend is good. If security got that funding at the beginning of the year, we're seeing that funding has stayed through the end of the year a lot more effectively than it has in prior years. I think that's good news for the economy. Revenues are becoming a little bit more predictable. And it's good news for the security organizations because they've been able to justify the value of security. They've been able to say, why are we doing this? And what's the real value we're getting from this? Thus, you shouldn't be cutting my budget. Now, I know during 2008, everybody used the trick where, you know, 2008, 2009, they were saying, look, every department's got to take a cut. You know, IT, you're going to take a big cut. HR, legal, security, you're taking your cut too. And the smart CISOs would make a list and say, okay, here's all the risks. Which one, CFO, do you want to accept? Just sign off publicly that you accept these risks, and when the bad things happen, I got nothing to do with it. So you can cut my little security budget. My security's 10% less of the IT budget, but sure, you can cut 15, whatever you want. Just cut as much, just sign off on the risk. And that was pretty effective. We found during 2008, 2009, you know what? When the CFOs had to understand the risk and sign, you guys can stay. But all the other departments were going to make the cuts because we've got to. Revenues are down. But what did that force us to do? It forced us to show what the risks were. It forced us to document them. It forced us to say, here's the business value. We're protecting you against these risks. An exercise that some security executives hadn't done in a while. So that kept some form of security budgets over time. And now that we're able to articulate the value of security, we're able to keep those budgets more and more effectively. Also, another piece of good news, not that security breaches and incidents are up, but that the impact of those are becoming less. I think we've spent a lot of money on DLP, and hopefully that money's spent effectively. We spent a lot on monitoring controls, and it's at least allowed us to know what's happening while it's happening so we can react more effectively. If we can't prevent it, and you can't stop everything, you can detect it and you can respond to it.
We're sorry,
So,
your conference is ending now. Please hang on.
Thank you, Mark.
So there's some good news here that even though the incidents are down, the impact to our organizations are less. Does that mean we're adding value? Absolutely yes. It absolutely means we are. And I think that's one thing that we should be leveraging and should be highlighting. And finally, to hit the point, what's driving it? Well, we've seen this the last couple of years, but we think we're confirmed as a trend that almost half the respondents say economic conditions rank as the top driver of security spending, with business continuity next, as well as reputation, policy compliance, regulatory compliance. It's the economy. Should it be the economy? I don't think so. But this is the world we live in. These are the rules of the game we have to play. Last year, we saw what we thought was a reversal of a trend. We saw a bit of an uptick. We had a 4-year trend that was going down, and then we saw a little jump last year to the 2011 in malicious code detection tools, DLP, SIMs, security incident event management tools. But especially given all the different types of risks we've got to protect against, cyber nuisance, crime, espionage, hacktivism, you would hope these tools would be getting more traction, but we continued our downward trend on things that, from my perspective, help companies identify and protect against all 4 of those waves of cyber risks and cyber incidents. Now, why is this? I think there's 2 reasons. A little bit of nervousness in the economy, and even though we hope the budgets are going up, we may not have gotten what we wanted. The other challenge, too, is getting the value from these tools. Too many companies have said, well, we've got to have a DLP. And they plug it in, and they turn it on, and they attach it to everything they need to attach it to. And they get 13 million events every 2 days. And somebody, I can't even print out that many. How am I going to go through this? How am I going to find it? Well, step 1, they needed to tune it. There's a lot of work making sure that that technology solution was right for your environment, that you were looking for just the right things, that you were searching for specific keywords and not looking for everything possibly out there. And I know every vendor will tell you, we've got a template for that. We've got the Sarbanes-Oxley template, and we've got the PCI template. Just plug it in, it'll work. I haven't seen that work really well in my particular experience. They're a good starting point. You definitely want to leverage them, but you've got to take it to the next level. to get the value from the tool. So one is configuration. Number two, somebody's got to do something with the data. If you got budget for a tool, did you get budget for the person to do the process out of the tool? Well, we were so much fighting for the budget to just get the tool and the license and wait until the end of the quarter to negotiate with the software vendor and all that. Yeah, we figured we'll get the people next year. But then we wonder why we're not getting the value of that technology. And the final piece, we're seeing policies going down. So are people removing policies? No, but as new companies are coming up and joining, are they putting the policies in place? Are they putting a robust framework in place? And some which we think are, really key, classifying the value of business data. And we had a question as we were discussing this. Assets and asset management. Isn't that an IT problem? Isn't that the CIO's problem, not the CISO's problem? Well, it should be, yes, you're right. But it falls many times, a surprising amount of times, for the security department to say, we need to go out and create an inventory of what we have so we can begin to secure it. You can't secure what you don't know you have. It's funny that one of the great things about standing up here and speaking is you get the view and you can see the people smirking, nodding, and smiling. There's a couple of people in the room who've had this exact conversation, that how am I going to protect it if I don't even know what it is? And that takes to the next level, which we'll talk through in one of the next slides, of we also need to know what data elements we have. We need to know where they're located, what jurisdictions. So there's some heavy lifting that needs to be done before we start protecting anything. And not having the policies is not a good start. To that point, we saw generally within or about the margin of error, but definitely less than we did 3 or 4 years ago, respondents saying they know and have an accurate inventory of locations and jurisdictions where data is stored, and an accurate inventory of where personal data for employees and customers is collected, transmitted, and stored. And it's in the 30% of the respondents. So that tells us 70% globally don't know where the data is, don't know what laws and regulations apply to it. While this is all good for security consultants in business, I don't know about you, but I'm hoping the companies who I trust with my personal data are doing these steps to protect that information. And one of the big challenges is security folks have to keep up with an ever-changing environment. True story, and I'm sure this played out in a bunch of companies in the room here. A policy was said, this great new tablet is out. There's no way we're going to allow, we can't secure data going onto the tablet. About 24 hours later, the CEO came in and said, hey, look what I got. Isn't this great? This is fabulous. I've got this new tablet and I can get my email on it, and I'm going to get, I'm just going to email my work stuff to my AOL account or my Gmail account so I can get email on the tablet, and I'm going to get my, calendar on it, and, I'm going to look up the stock price of the company, and we're going to track other information. Well, that whole not bringing the tablet into the environment, that went out the window very fast because of the CEO had the CIO and CFO, and, the dam burst open. And with all new technologies that are coming out, some will argue that it's the end of the PC era, that we're moving into the mobile device era. Are we ready for that? Were these devices designed with security in mind? So we're playing a game of catch-up on a regular basis. So we're seeing companies playing that catch-up. So 26 to 29% have cloud strategies, 37 to 44% mobile device security strategies. But who here thinks that only 44% of our respondents have mobile devices in their enterprise? Yeah, I think the number is a little bigger than 44%, somewhere closer to 100. One of my favorite quotes I heard this year was somebody said today, a 15-year-old in sub-Saharan Africa has access to more and better information than the President of the United States did 15 years ago. So if that's true, what access and what information are the employees of your companies walking around with? And how are you protecting? And we've had discussion after discussion in the last couple of weeks of the BYOD trend. How are you protecting that bring your own device strategy when you don't know what device they're going to bring? If it was a computer, okay, set up a virtual session and away you go. But does that work on all these different platforms? The game continues to change. Are you ready to keep up? Do you know what the rules are? So how you play the game, for us, alignment, leadership, and training. First, some good news. We had about 76% said their security spending was reasonably, either completely or somewhat aligned with their security spending, and 79% said their policies were aligned with business objectives. Those numbers need to be higher. Is there a little bit of hubris there? Yeah, probably. But is that the first step for knowing the risks that your business has and addressing those risks? Yes. And back to our points about CapEx and OpEx spending, how many people have retired a security solution recently? How many of you have said, you know what, we're not, we just retired the mainframe, but we're still paying for the mainframe security software? It's probably time to do something about that. Now, I know you took that mainframe security software money and put it to your DLP solution because nobody was questioning your OpEx, but boy, you got a lot of pressure on your CapEx. So you played the games with it, but are you putting things in the right buckets and showing the real value of what you're doing? What keeps security from being what it should be? Lack of leadership was one of the top answers. Again, leadership at the CEO level. Insufficient CapEx is another very significant. Lack of vision or understanding. Lack of an effective security strategy. I think that my great example for this was the hurricane last summer. I expected my basement to be flooded. I expected I got a huge tree in my backyard. I expected it to go through the roof of my house and expected to be without power for, how many people, anybody lost power in the windstorm this past weekend? A couple of hands going up around the room. I thought, I live on the South Shore of Long Island, I thought there was no way I was going to have power. And when I got home, I had power, tree was still standing, basement wasn't flooded. But glass all over my kitchen floor. Why? What? Turns out the pressure change of the hurricane coming over the New York region was so intense that the door on my microwave oven exploded, shattering glass. I bought a generator. I was ready for the power outage. I had a sump pump installed. I was ready for the flood. Well, the tree, I hadn't managed that risk so well, and I still have to. It's a really nice tree. But did I know what the problem was that was actually going to happen? And don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled to replace a microwave oven door. If that was the worst thing that happened, I'll take it. But did I know what the problem was that I could protect myself against? Would have put some tape over the door or something. But I didn't even have agreement. I didn't know what problem was going to hit me during that hurricane. Do you know what problems are going to hit you that you need to protect against? Do you know what game you should be playing? And this one always gets me, and it's probably one of the least expensive things you can do, and one of the most effective things you can do. It's training your employees, but less than half the respondents have security training programs. And I won't show of hands, but I'll just tell you that either your people have been phished or companies have done phishing exercises to send an email that asks for personal information to see who responds. We've done this again and again, and somewhere between 15 and 30%. And in fact, there's one we did very recently where we got over 50%. We thought we were very clever in the email. It was pretty good. But we got half the respondents to that phishing exercise to give us their credentials. Step one, fixing a problem, is admitting you have it. So, what does this mean for your business? Four buckets of things. Number one, a risk assessment strategy that's aligned with investments. What problems are you trying to solve? Knowing all those problems that are out there and making sure you've got the funding to address those specific risks and target it. Get it going in the right direction. Know what data you have. Now, we call this a threat modeling exercise. What are the data elements? Where are they? Who wants it? And what tactics, what attack vectors are they going to use to try to get to the data? What are your requirements? What laws, regulations do you need to comply with? And what business strategies are you rolling out? So, are you ready for them? And embrace that new way of thinking in which information security is not just protecting data, but it can create value. Going to a major trade show in a couple of weeks, one of the organizations I work with was able to take $3 million out of a business process by leveraging their identity management solution. They were able to change the game for their company by leveraging something they'd already invested in without any additional CapEx or OpEx. That's a security person who really added bottom line value for their business. And with that, you can contact myself for more information, or any of my partners listed here in the US or nationally, or pwc.com/GISS 2013. We've put benchmarking data up on the site as well, so you can go and compare yourself to companies of your size and industry.